For 43 years, I carried a secret that weighed heavier with each passing day. Every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual conversation about my life, I smiled, nodded, and buried the truth deeper. But secrets have a way of demanding to be heard, especially when they're wrapped around your heart like a vice. This is the story of Margaret, the woman I loved in the shadows, and how our hidden love finally stepped into the light. Some truths can't stay buried forever, and mine was about to break free. I met Margaret in the autumn of 1978 at a community art class in downtown Minneapolis. I was 32, recently divorced, and desperately trying to fill the emptiness that had settled into my bones. She walked in late that first evening, her silver-streaked hair catching the fluorescent lights, and something inside me shifted. We were both enrolled in watercolor painting, though neither of us had any real talent. What we discovered instead was each other. Margaret was 40 then, with laugh lines that deepened when she smiled, and hands that moved with quiet confidence. She'd lost her husband 2 years prior and wore her grief like a familiar cardigan, comfortable but suffocating. Our friendship bloomed over coffee after class, then weekend museum visits, then long drives through the countryside where we'd pull over to paint terrible landscapes and talk until the sun set. I told myself it was just friendship, that the flutter in my chest when she laughed was admiration, nothing more. But one crisp November evening, as we sat in her car watching the first snowfall, our hands touched, reaching for the same thermos. Neither of us pulled away. The silence stretched between us, loaded with everything we couldn't say. When she finally looked at me, her eyes held a question I'd been too afraid to ask myself. "I think I'm in trouble," she whispered. "Me too." I breathed back. That was the night everything changed. We didn't kiss, not yet, but we both knew we'd crossed a line we could never uncross. The world was different in 1978. Women like us didn't exist in the open. We had children, reputations, families who would never understand. So we made a choice that would define the next 4 decades. We would love each other in secret. The years that followed were a careful choreography of stolen moments and elaborate cover stories. Margaret and I became experts at hiding in plain sight. To the world, we were simply close friends to widowed women who enjoyed each other's company. My daughters thought it was sweet that I had a companion. Her son was relieved his mother wasn't alone. We learned to communicate in a language only we understood. A specific knock on the door meant the coast was clear. Tuesday evening book club was our code for dinner and precious hours alone at her house. We celebrated anniversaries in secret, marking the years with small gifts hidden in the backs of drawers of pressed flower. A handwritten note, a photograph taken when no one was watching. The hardest part wasn't the secrecy itself, it was the isolation. We couldn't hold hands in public, couldn't introduce each other as anything more than friends, couldn't be honest about the most important relationship in our lives. When Margaret's sister died, I sat in the back pew at the funeral, just another acquaintance, while she grieved alone in the front row. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1995, she couldn't be listed as my emergency contact. We built a life in the margins, in the spaces between what was acceptable and what was true. Her basement became our sanctuary, a small space we'd furnished with our favorite things, where we could be ourselves without pretense. We called it our room, though we never spoke its name aloud to anyone else. But love, even hidden love, finds ways to flourish. We traveled together under the guise of girlfriends' trips, celebrating our love in anonymous hotel rooms across the country. We grew old together in secret, watching each other's hair turn white, holding each other through losses and triumphs, building a partnership that was as real as any marriage, just invisible to everyone else. Everything changed on a Thursday morning in March 2021. I found Margaret collapsed in her kitchen, the phone still in her hand where she'd been trying to call me. The stroke had been massive, and by the time the ambulance arrived, I was already there. I still had my key, still came over most mornings for coffee before the world woke up. At the hospital, I wasn't allowed in her room. I wasn't family. I wasn't listed as anything official. Her son David made all the decisions while I sat in the waiting room, my heart shattering with every passing hour. The nurses looked at me with pity when I asked for updates, giving me vague reassurances meant for distant friends. Margaret survived, but the stroke left her unable to speak clearly and needing constant care. David arranged for her to move into an assisted living facility, and I watched helplessly as our life together was dismantled. He sold her house, or house really, and sorted through her belongings, throwing away 40 years of our hidden history, because he didn't know what it meant. I was allowed to visit her at the facility, but only during regular visiting hours, like any other friend. I'd sit beside her bed, holding her hand when no one was watching, my heart breaking as she struggled to form words. One afternoon, she managed to squeeze my hand 3 times, our old signal for, "I love you," and I knew I couldn't keep living this lie. Margaret deserved better. We deserved better. At 75 and 79, we'd spent 43 years hiding, and what had it gotten us? She was locked away in a sterile room, and I was labeled a friend who visited too often. I made a decision that day. It was time to tell the truth. I started with my daughters. I invited them both to lunch at my favorite restaurant, the one Margaret and I used to go to, where the staff knew us as the regular ladies. My hands shook as I stirred my coffee, trying to find the words I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "There's something I need to tell you about Margaret," I began. "She's not just my friend. She's been my partner for 43 years. I'm gay, and Margaret is the love of my life." The silence that followed felt eternal. My youngest daughter, Sarah, spoke first. "Mom, we know." I looked up, shocked, and saw tears in both their eyes. "We've known for years," she continued. "We were just waiting for you to feel safe enough to tell us." Their acceptance broke something open inside me. Next was David, Margaret's son. I drove to his house, carrying a box of photographs and letters I'd kept hidden, proof of our love, evidence of our life together. He answered the door looking exhausted from months of caretaking, and I didn't give him a chance to turn me away. "Your mother and I were in love," I said simply. "For 43 years, we were partners, and she needs me now more than she's ever needed me before." David didn't speak at first. He looked at the photographs, Margaret and me at the Grand Canyon, at Niagara Falls, at a cabin in Montana, always just close enough to suggest something more. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and saw what had been invisible for decades. I was the person who knew his mother best, who loved her most completely. "I think I need to sit down," he said. Within a week, David had me added to Margaret's care plan. Within a month, I'd moved into the assisted living facility, into a room right next door to hers. We spent our days together openly for the first time in our lives. I held her hand without looking over my shoulder. I kissed her forehead in front of the nurses. I introduced myself as her partner to anyone who asked. Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep 6 months after I moved to the facility, with me lying beside her, holding her hand. At her funeral, I sat in the front row with David, and when it was my turn to speak, I told everyone the truth. I told them about our 43 years of love, about the life we built in secret, about the courage it took to finally live openly, even if only for a brief time. I'm 80 now, and I carry no more secrets. I share my story not for sympathy, but for the others still hiding, still waiting for the right time. The right time is now. Love doesn't wait for perfect circumstances, and life is too short to spend it in shadows. If my story touched your heart, please share it. There are countless others still living in secret, waiting for permission to speak their truth. Let this be their sign that it's never too late to love openly.